Okay, so far what we've studied is that what the connective tissue does, its function, and what it contains. It contains the cells and the extracellular matrix. What kind of cells it contains, the 4 common types I've mentioned over here, and we're going to study them in detail now. And another thing that it contains is a high amount of ECM, primarily the ECM, which contains protein fibers and ground substance. So let's get started with the cells. So the first cell in the series would be, of course, the fibroblast. Let me just write that down, fibroblast. This is a large and very visible cell because it contains an eosinophilic cytoplasm. So a cell that is colored usually blue on the inside, and its nucleus would be very active. Active means that it would have the euchromatin structure. On a histology slide inside the nucleus, you can see 2 types of chromatin structures. Euchromatin. Let me just teach you this a little bit before we go into it. So euchromatin and heterochromatin. All right. And euchromatin is usually very, very loosely packed, and it is being transcribed. So transcription is going on, then translation, and it is an active sort of cell stage where transcription is going on and the cell is making proteins. But inside the heterochromatin, it is coiled up, and it might be present in the form of chromosomes, and it's very dense and coiled up. So in the active, this would be your active because it's being transcribed, so it's loose, but this would be your inactive nuclei or chromatin. So in the case of a fibroblast, you'd normally see euchromatin inside its nucleus, and it would have an eosinophilic cytoplasm. So it would look something like, let me just show you a picture of a fibrocyte here. So this would be your fibrocyte. You can see the eosinophilic cytoplasm. However, the picture is not good enough to show you the nucleus, but normally you'd see an inactive nucleus or an inactive chromatin inside the nucleus. That's called the euchromatin. And actually, this is quite a good example of a connective tissue. Here we can see like the ECM. So this would be your ground substance, and these would be your collagen, and then these would be your fibroblasts, among other cell types that might be present. But right now it just shows fibroblast, collagen, and the ground substance. So as we've studied that the fibroblast is in an active state, so it has got the euchromatin, and the euchromatin is being transcribed into, for example, the mRNA, and then mRNA goes into the ribosomes and produces proteins and other stuff. So in an active state, it would be secreting something, right? So the question arises as to what it's secreting, and that is the components of the extracellular matrix. Remember, the cells are present and surrounded by the extracellular matrix, so something must be producing the extracellular matrix that is present in such a high quantity, and that is the cells themselves. So the cells, primarily the fibroblast, produces the secretions that are part of the ECM. The secretions, for example, collagen and elastin, if it is present, but primarily collagen would definitely be secreted, and the components of the ground substance, for example, the glycosaminoglycans and proteoglycans. Hyaluronic acid, etc. We'll study what those are in a bit when we go over the ground substance and what those are. And so this fibroblast right here would be producing all the ground substance, and this collagen right here, it would be producing and secreting those. And this is targeted by growth factors. So growth factors that are secreted by our endocrine system, they may come in and target this particular fibrocyte and trigger the release of all of its secretions. Now, in the previous chapter, we studied something called the myoepithelial cells right next to the epithelial cells. In this case, in the case of the connective tissue, we also have myofibroblasts together with the fibroblast. The myofibroblasts also have some characteristics of muscle function. So, and they're particularly found, usually found in the scar tissue. Like, for example, when there is a wound and the wound is healing, then at the site of the scar tissue, you'd see that some of the fibroblasts may differentiate into myofibroblast, and they would promote the contraction of that scar tissue. So scar tissue may contain myofibroblasts. Another type of cell that may be present in the connective tissue are adipocytes. Even though I haven't mentioned them yet. Number 2, let me just... adipocytes. All right, these are cells that store fats and triglycerides. So these are fat-storing cells for fuel, extra fuel reserve, or for heat insulation and heat production. But the next chapter is going to be all about adipocytes and the adipose tissue, so we don't need to discuss them here. Let's just move on to the cells that we studied. So next up, we studied the macrophages. Macrophages are white blood cells, right? And they emerge from monocytes. So hematopoietic stem cell inside the bone marrow would produce a monocyte. So hematopoietic stem cell, HSC, would produce a monocyte, right? And this monocyte will travel from blood into its specific tissue, and then it would mature into a macrophage, right? And this macrophage contains digestive enzymes and lysosomes that engulf and sort of endocytose and phagocytose the pathogens or debris or damaged cells that are giving the signals to be removed. Macrophages typically have an oval or an irregularly shaped nucleus. Oval, sort of like a kidney-shaped nucleus. Kidney-shaped. I've colored this red just to identify the histology of the macrophages. So they have an oval kidney-shaped nucleus, and because of the fact that they contain these digestive enzymes like lysosomes and lysosomic enzymes, then they also have a granular cytoplasm. So it's got these granules in a cytoplasm that are able to then digest whatever the cell engulfs. So it has a granular Now, the name of each of these macrophages may be different depending on the location. Remember that it's traveling as an immature form as a monocyte. It travels to blood into its specific location where it matures, right? And it matures into a macrophage. And this macrophage may have different names depending on the location at which they're present. So, for example, in the liver, they would be called the Kupffer cells. Let me just, okay. Kupffer cells in the CNS, in the liver. In the CNS, central nervous system, they would be called the microglial cells. In the skin, they would be called the Langerhans. In the spleen, they would be called the dendritic cells. Oops, and that's an N right there, dendritic cells. And in the bone, they're called osteoclasts. Osteoclasts in the bone. All right, so next up we have the mast cells. These are very, very important for the connective tissue. Let me just highlight them to let you know that these are very important. The mast cells are primarily part of your immune system. So these come, just like the macrophages, these come from the hematopoietic stem cell in the bone marrow, and then the myeloid stem cell, and so on, and then the mast cell. And we will study this lineage, by the way. Don't worry about the lineage as of right now. We will study this in its own chapter. We have a chapter coming up in which we will study all the lineages of all the blood cells and the connective tissue cells that we have. As far as the histology is concerned, let me just show you a picture of a mast cell right here. So this would generally be how a mast cell looks like. So it has a circular nucleus, usually centrally located, and has a very densely colored cytoplasm. You can see over here. So it's basophilic. Basophilic means it would be attracted to a basic dye. So basophilic, and a basic dye would be able to colorate very, very distinctively. And as we can see here, that it's very granularly rich. It's got so many granules right here. So we can say that it's a very granular cytoplasm. So that's the mast cell histology. So the function of the mast cell primarily is the allergic reactions. So if you've had allergies in the past, then you can blame the mast cells for that. So basically what happens is that, for example, let me just get over here into the mast cell. So in case an allergen comes in and it is being detected on the surface of the mast cells, and what it does is that it secretes all of its secretions outside into the connective tissue, and it causes an allergic reaction. We will study the details of this later, but let me just go over the secretions that it secretes to bring about this change or these allergic reactions. So some of the secretions that mast cells produce in case of an allergic reaction include heparin. We have studied this in biochemistry. This is an anticoagulant. Okay, or histamines. Also might have studied this in biochemistry. It's a byproduct of histidines, and what they do is that increase the vessel permeability. So any vessels that may be present around that particular connective tissue, its permeability will be increased, and it would be more susceptible to leaking out the interstitial fluid, causing a buildup of fluid and inflammation and edema and all those things. And it would also be susceptible to leak out or allow the cells that are present in that particular vessel to escape. They might secrete the serine proteases and also for inflammation. Okay, leukocyte chemotactic factors, like for example neutrophils. Neutrophil is a type of a leukocyte, white blood cell, eosinophil. Another type of a leukocyte or a white blood cell, and what they do is that they secrete these cells chemotactic factors. These are chemotactic factors. These are chemicals that allow these cells tactile movements towards the place that they are secreted in. So chemicals, tactic stands for tactile movements, and what they do is that they allow the cells to move towards the place in which these chemotactic factors are being secreted in. So for example, if there's an allergen and these things are being secreted, then they would allow these two cells to move into that place because there's an allergen present, or there's a foreign body present to attack that foreign body. Another mast cell secretion would be the cytokines. And these are again used to attract leukocytes. They also attract leukocytes. Okay, the leukocytes move in to where they're secreted, and also stimulates the differentiation of leukocytes. We will study what that is later in the leukocytes chapter. All right, so basically what happens in case of an allergic reaction, as we've studied here, the allergen comes in. Let's assume this is an allergen. It comes in on the surface of the mast cell, and it is detected, and these secretions like the serine proteases and histamines and heparin and the chemotactic factors and cytokines are released, and this causes an allergic reaction. These are detected. And then there's also a production of the IgE antibody, the IgE antibody. All right, so that the next time this particular allergen comes in, it is detected in an even better way. So this cell would start producing the IgE antibody that is complement to that specific allergen. So they would produce the antibody after first, for example, after first allergic reaction, this cell would then produce, let me just draw this here. These all would be your granules, and then this would be your nucleus. And it would produce IgE antibodies on its surface, which would be complementary to the allergen that was detected earlier, so that the second time that particular allergen moves in, it is detected even quickly, and even quicker and more rapid secretion of all of the mast cells secretions takes place. Now there's a clinical correlate to this, and that is that in case of the secretion of eosinophil chemotactic factors, remember we did that here, eosinophil chemotactic factors. In case of the resecretion of eosinophil chemotactic factors, a condition called the anaphylactic shock or anaphylaxis. We may have studied this earlier in anatomy. This is an allergic reaction, especially in the case of second exposure to the particular allergen. Because in the second exposure, you have these IgE antibodies, so the allergic reaction or the hypersensitivity reaction is a lot more rapid, and it results in this anaphylactic shock, which may result in a very low pulse and closure of the airways, and you may need to intubate the patient and stuff. And that's pretty much it. So mast cells are so what we've so far studied is that mast cells are responsible for the allergic reactions, and in case of detection of an allergen or a particular antigen, they secrete these secretions. And as far as the histology is concerned, they have a basophilic cytoplasm, and they have a very, very granular cytoplasm as well. So next up we have the plasma cells. These are just the white blood cells, beta lymphocytes. We will study this in a separate chapter later. But basically, there are white blood cells we'll call beta lymphocytes, and these beta lymphocytes differentiate into plasma cells. And then these plasma cells, what they do is that they secrete antibodies. And therefore, these are part of the immune system, and as white blood cells, they're also derived from the hematopoietic stem cell that is present in the bone marrow. Now, let me mention a little bit of histology concerned to the plasma cell. These are large cells, okay, as compared to other leukocytes. These are very large, and they have an ovoid nucleus. Okay, and they also have a basophilic cytoplasm, just like the mast cells. And these are pretty much the major cell types that are present in the connective tissue. So let me go over what we've studied so far. So the primary cell, let me just highlight this as well, were the fibroblasts that we studied inside the connective tissue, and then the adipocytes that we will study in the next chapter, and then the macrophages. These are types of white blood cells that mature depending on location, and then they are given their specific names according to the location in which they mature. And then the mast cells, which are the primary allergic reaction cells, and they had these secretions that they secreted and very granular cytoplasm because of these secretions, and then the plasma cells that secrete antibodies. And so there you have it, the cells, like for example over here, the cells of the connective tissue. And now we are going to begin the extracellular matrix.